You are about to discover the most dangerous and unbelievable human errors in history. Seemingly small decisions that push the entire world to the brink of collapse. The countdown begins now. We'll start at number 10 and work our way to number 1, the most shocking of all. And number 10. You might even remember it. Number 10. The false nuclear alert in Hawaii, 2018. Imagine being on vacation in a tropical paradise, enjoying your breakfast, when suddenly your phone lights up with this message: ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. That's exactly what happened to over 1 million people in Hawaii on January 13, 2018. The alert was accidentally sent during a routine emergency drill. The employee responsible confused a test with a real alert, and with one wrong click, unleashed total panic. Families said goodbye, people hid in bathrooms, churches filled with terrified citizens. For 38 minutes, the population believed a nuclear war had begun. And the most shocking part? It took more than half an hour to correct the mistake and send a new message saying it had all been a false alarm. One button. One click. One psychological apocalypse. Number 9. Stanislav Petrov's error, 1983. Now let's go back to the 1980s, in the middle of the Cold War. Just past midnight, Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was on duty. Suddenly, alarms blared. Soviet satellites had detected the launch of nuclear missiles from the United States. Protocol demanded that Petrov immediately inform his superiors. But something didn't add up. It was a small number of missiles, and his gut told him it could be a technical error. Under immense pressure, he chose to disobey direct orders and did not report the supposed attack. Later, it was confirmed. It had been a false alarm. Reflections from clouds had tricked the sensors. Had Petrov followed protocol, the Soviet Union would have launched real nuclear warheads in retaliation. His error in judgment, not blindly obeying, may have saved humanity from total nuclear war. How many times in history has a single decision prevented the end of the world? Number 8. The catastrophic Chernobyl test, 1986. When the engineers at the Chernobyl nuclear plant decided to run a safety test on reactor number 4, they had no idea they were about to trigger the worst nuclear disaster in history. The objective was simple: simulate a power outage and test whether the turbines could generate enough electricity until backup generators kicked in. But the test was poorly planned and conducted at an off-peak time. Poorly trained operators disabled critical safety systems. And when they realized the reactor was becoming unstable, it was already too late. At 1:23 a.m., a catastrophic explosion released tons of radioactive material over Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia, and eventually much of Europe. Hundreds of thousands of people were exposed to radiation. The error wasn't just technical, it was human. Arrogance, haste, and the Soviet culture of covering up mistakes proved fatal. And the consequences still echo today. Number 7. The cassette tape mistake in the U.S., 1979. Believe it or not, in November 1979, the U.S. military went on high alert, believing the Soviet Union had launched a large-scale nuclear attack. Fighter jets were armed. Nuclear bombers were moments away from takeoff. All because of a cassette tape. A NORAD technician inserted a training tape into the main computer, but forgot to inform anyone it was just a simulation. The system interpreted it as a real attack, and the military initiated response protocols. Only after intense moments of panic did someone realize the error. Had a less cautious general been in command, the U.S. could have launched a nuclear counterattack to a threat that didn't even exist. Never has a cassette tape held such destructive power in the wrong hands. Number 6. The atomic bomb that nearly detonated in North Carolina, 1961. Few people know this, but the United States nearly detonated a nuclear bomb on its own soil. In 1961, a B-52 bomber suffered a mechanical failure and began breaking apart in midair, releasing 2 nuclear bombs over North Carolina. And these weren't ordinary bombs. They were 260 times more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima. One bomb landed intact. The other activated almost all of its detonation mechanisms. Of the 4 safety devices meant to prevent a nuclear explosion, 3 failed. A single cheap and simple switch was the only thing that stopped hundreds of thousands of people from being vaporized. This was never made public at the time. Only years later did secret documents come to light. Imagine what would have happened if that tiny component had also failed. Today, much of the U.S. East Coast could have been a radioactive crater. Number 5. The Norwegian Missile Incident, 1995. Now picture this. Russia detects a fast-moving missile coming from the north. Their alert system identifies it as a possible U.S. nuclear strike. This happened in 1995. But the missile in question was actually a scientific rocket launched from Norway to study the Northern Lights. Norway had notified officials in advance. But the message never reached the Russian military. For a few tense minutes, Russian generals considered a nuclear counterattack. President Boris Yeltsin himself was informed and had to activate the nuclear briefcase. Fortunately, before taking any drastic action, they realized the missile would fall harmlessly into the sea. It was the only time in history that Russia's nuclear suitcase was activated by mistake. A communication failure, quite literally, that almost started World War III. Number 4. The NORAD fire alarm incident, 1979. Once again, we return to the chaos of the Cold War. In June 1979, the U.S. Air Command Center, NORAD, was thrown into panic when the defense system indicated a massive Soviet nuclear strike. Red lights flashed. Emergency protocols were initiated. Fighter jets armed with nuclear bombs were preparing for takeoff. But what triggered the alert? A technical glitch caused by a simple fire alarm inside the building. The alarm interfered with radar systems and generated false data showing an enemy attack. By the narrowest margin, a faulty smoke detector almost ended modern civilization. This episode is as absurd as it is terrifying. A simulated fire nearly ignited a real one. Number 3. The 2003 blackout in the US and Canada. This one may seem less apocalyptic, but what happened on August 14, 2003, exposed just how fragile modern infrastructure really is. It all began when a transmission line brushed against a tree in the state of Ohio. The system, poorly configured, didn't detect the issue in time. One by one, other lines began to fail like falling dominoes. In minutes, 50 million people were left without electricity across 8 U.S. states and parts of Canada. Trains stopped. Hospitals went into emergency mode. Traffic lights shut down. Entire cities were plunged into darkness. It took days to fully restore power. But the most alarming takeaway? This event showed that a simple failure could be exploited on a massive scale by cyberattacks, and the world still isn't prepared for that. All because of a maintenance mistake. A tree. A wire. A vulnerable hemisphere. Number 2. The algorithm that nearly crashed the world in minutes, 2010. Imagine a system so fast it can do the work of hundreds of financial traders in mere seconds. Now imagine that this system, acting entirely on its own, starts behaving erratically, selling off assets at lightning speed, as if the global economy were collapsing. This really happened. On May 6, 2010, an event known as the Flash Crash shook the New York Stock Exchange and nearly triggered an instant global economic meltdown. It all started with a high-frequency trading algorithm, programmed with a critical flaw by a single company. The system began dumping massive sell orders into the market, triggering an avalanche effect. Within minutes, prices plummeted, valuable stocks were sold for mere pennies, and panic spread across markets around the globe. In just 5 minutes, the stock market lost nearly $1 trillion in value. The scariest part? If automatic safeguards hadn't kicked in to freeze trading, the collapse could have spiraled out of control, bankrupting banks, destroying companies, and unleashing a financial crisis of unprecedented scale. A single coding error, a small detail, almost erased decades of global economic progress. And the most ironic part? There was no war, no natural disaster, no cyber attack. It was simply a digital human error. Now ask yourself, would you trust the fate of the world to lines of code that no one is watching in real time? Number 1. The harmless missile that nearly started World War III, 1995. It was a calm winter day in 1995 when a scientific rocket was launched from Norway with a simple goal: to study the atmosphere and the Northern Lights. Everything followed protocol. The Norwegian government had informed its neighbors in advance, including Russia. But here's where the fatal error happened. The warning never reached the Russian military. When Russia's early warning radar detected the missile rising into the sky, the automatic war protocol was immediately activated. To their system, it looked exactly like an intercontinental ballistic missile launched from a U.S. submarine. The nuclear briefcase was opened. President Boris Yeltsin, visibly shaken, was granted full access to the button that could end the entire world. For several tense minutes, the fate of the planet hung by a thread. The clock was ticking. Military protocol demanded an instant response. But something wasn't right. The missile wasn't breaking into multiple warheads, as a real nuclear strike would. And then, in one of the biggest collective sighs of relief in human history, the alarm was called off. The launch was declared harmless. A misunderstanding. A missing message. And Earth narrowly avoided complete annihilation. One lost warning. One misread signal. And the world came seconds away from ending itself. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Which of these human errors shocked you the most? Until next time, a big hug from Mr. Square.